thanks for having me here today, Isabella. I think this is a great opportunity to give everyone a little bit more insight on what we're building with OOVA and the team really in general. To be quite honest, I never really thought that I would be starting a company, but OOVA was really born out of a personal struggle of my own. I had a really tough time conceiving my son. It took me 18 months to have him, and the journey for us was really not easy. My husband and I expected it to be difficult because we were both in our 30s, and I've never had regular cycles my whole life. So we had a really tough conversation early on that if we didn't conceive naturally, then we didn't want to go the invasive route. For me, it was actually easier to make peace with possibly never being a mother than it was to go through a potential miscarriage or a failed cycle. I just didn't think I could really deal with that loss. So I started doing everything right. I started peeing on sticks every morning. I used every fertility app that was available, took my body temperature every morning. And it was really frustrating because after 18 months, I really was no smarter than I was on day one. All I really learned was that I had irregular cycles, and I knew that going in. So about 3 months into my journey, I became obsessed with trying to decode some of the tools that were available to me to rig them for me, knowing that they were designed for women with perfect cycles, and I wasn't that. So it was really frustrating because I really couldn't crack them. Midway through my journey, basically the scientist in me came out and I was like, let's figure out a way to measure hormones at home because that's what the foundation of all of our reproductive systems are. And if I can figure that out, then I'll know exactly what's happening with my cycle. And that's really where the idea for OOVA was born. What we've developed today is an at-home test that measures multiple hormones. So we measure luteinizing hormone and progesterone in the privacy of a woman's home with clinical accuracy, to be quite honest. And it's all done without having to mail samples to a lab. It's done completely remotely and within seconds. When you order an OOVA kit, this is the box that you get. Inside the box, you'll get this little insert that has a note from me to all of you explaining my story, which I've already shared with you. But then there's also really detailed instructions on how to use it. So the product works as a urine strip where you can provide a sample either midstream or as a dip test, and then you scan it with your phone. So I'll show you that in a little bit more detail. There's a bubble bag with a handle and a holder. So the holder sits on your countertop, and then the handle basically helps ease sample collection. There's a little eject button so you don't have to actually interact with the urine sample. And then you also get this box full of a month's supply of disposable test strips. So let me see, I have one open in here. Oh, so each one is individually sealed. And basically when you open a cartridge up, this is what it looks like. So you provide the urine sample on the sample pad. There's a little QR code, which you like to call the miracle code, and then there's a window where you'll see 1, 2, or 3 lines depending on what your hormone levels are that day. So once you provide the urine sample on this works alongside an iOS app. So you provide the sample, you turn the timer on in the app, and then you wait 10 minutes for the test to finish doing the analysis for you. Once the timer goes off, you scan it with your phone, and the experience is very similar to doing a mobile deposit, where there's a boundary box. You will align the cartridge in that boundary, and then it scans the results, and we do all the interpretation for you. So you're not having to detect whether there's a dark line, faint line, whatever. Our algorithm does all that for you, and then tells you exactly where you are in your cycle. So are you at low, high, peak ovulation? Have you released an egg? How many days until ovulation? We also provide you with a daily action plan. So especially in light of COVID, like a lot of women are feeling a little lost and not knowing what to do next. So OOVA really provides you with that next step. We give you an item in emotional wellness, nutritional health, and physical health to really take control of your fertility journey again. And as I mentioned, we track this data over time. So at the end of your cycle, you're actually provided with a report that shows you what your hormone trends look like. So we literally have designed this for that woman. more than 2/3 of the female population has an irregular cycle. So the way that OOVA works is we don't compare a woman's hormone data to some standard threshold or the perfect woman who honestly doesn't exist. We determine what every woman's personal baseline is for her hormone levels and then detect fluctuations by comparing to that. And we're able to get that sensitive because we're getting the quantitative measurements of the hormones. So every test is personalized. Every test is designed for you. It's really designed for the woman who has an irregular cycle. So I think it's kind of funny because I think a lot of fertility clinics are quite proud of that statistic of how many couples they've said like have the diagnosis of unexplained infertility, but like I can't even imagine how frustrating that diagnosis must be for a couple that's been trying for X months or Y number of years. And yeah, I think the biggest gap there is that a woman gets, or a couple is given that diagnosis, but really doesn't understand why or what's going on. And that's where OOVA adds a lot of value, because not only are we measuring these hormones quantitatively, but we track this data over time. So every cycle, you get a personalized report that tells you exactly how your hormones are behaving. And that's information that not only you, but your doctor can also use to really understand why you have unexplained infertility. We capture what your baseline is, and then we detect fluctuations by comparing to that baseline. So every test, again, is personalized. We know that everyone's day 5 and day 7 is very different. So we take all of that guesswork out. And when you download the app, you register with a lot of information that we capture, such as cycle length and various other things. We feed that into our algorithm, and then we tell you when you need to use an OOVA test. So we actually define what your scanning window should be. So there's no guesswork on your end. The third difference is that we actually track your data over time. So not only test after test, but cycle after cycle, we actually get even more intelligent about what's going on with your fertility profile.